We also have to decide whether we're going to sew our binding to the front of the quilt top or to the back of the quilt top. You know that typically if you're going to sew the binding by hand, the finishing stitching by hand, you would sew the binding to the top of the quilt, and then you would wrap it around and over the seam to the back, and you would do your hand stitching on the back of the quilt. But if we're going to sew it by machine, then typically we would want our first consideration to be what it's going to look like on the top of the quilt, and we're going to be top stitching it. So in that case, if you're going to machine stitch the finishing stitches, you want to sew the binding to the back of the quilt so that it will wrap around to the front, and we'll do our finishing stitching from the front of the quilt. So I've set this up. I was showing it to you wrong on the ironing board. I've set it up so that I'm going to be sewing it to the back. And I've got my leading tail set over here on the back side of the quilt. The foot that I'm using is my general purpose foot. On the Fuff machines, the general purpose foot, the distance from the needle in the center position to the edge of the foot out here, is a scant 3/8 of an inch. And I find that to be a nice width for my seam allowance. When I have 2.5 inch, when I've cut my binding 2.5 inches wide, and it makes a nice look to the binding when it's finished. So I'm going to use the edge of the foot out here as the guide, and I'm going to put that along the edge of the fabric. Keep the needle in the center position, and I have my stitch length set at 2 or 2.5 millimeters. You do not want to start sewing your binding at a corner. You want to start sewing it about in the middle of one side of your quilt top. And we're going to leave a length of the binding unsewn. So I've got it pinned here where it's going to start and end, but I'm not actually going to start sewing there. I'm going to start sewing down here. If this were a much larger piece, I typically would leave 6 to 8 to maybe 10 inches of the binding here at the starting edge that is unsewn at the beginning, and start, 6, 8, 10 inches from this end up here. So I would come down 6 or 8 inches and start here. Because this is a small block, I can't leave myself as much room as I would like to. But I'm going to start here where this pin is. That's where I'm going to start sewing. I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to take a few stitches. And I'm going to stop there because I need to fold this corner down here. As I come sewing down this edge, where the corner is, I want to stop sewing a seam allowance width from this edge. But you don't have to measure that. The easiest way to do that is to just stop and fold the fabric back on itself. I'm a little close here, but I'm just going to raise my foot and fold this. And I'm going to fold it back at a 45-degree angle. So this is a 45-degree angle here. And I'm folding it back so that the edge of the binding is making a straight line with this edge of the quilt. And I'm going to finger press that. And this is where you might want to use that seam roller. I don't have enough room here, but I'll show you when I get to the next corner how you can use that seam roller. Here I'm just going to use my fingernail to press it. And when I unfold it, I have a crease right here. If you want, you can take a pin and just put a pin right in that crease to hold it in place, and so that you can see it as you stitch down to it. So now I'm going to continue stitching slowly to get to that corner. I'm going to stop when I get to the pin. Stop with the needle down in the fabric. I actually think I took a stitch too far, so I'm going to back stitch one stitch, just hand turn it back, the needle down, and I'm going to pivot. Take that pin out. And I'm going to sew right off of the corner here. If you want, you can stop and use your tacking stitch on your machine if you have one, and just do a little tacking stitch in place, and then finish sewing off. Raise your needle, take it out, cut your thread, although you don't have to cut the thread, you could just whip it around. I like to cut the thread though. Then I'm going to turn it around here. And now I'm going to fold the fabric back again on that 45-degree angle so that my binding edge is lined up with the quilt edge down here. And then, so I folded it back on a 45-degree angle, and now I'm going to fold it again, but I'm going to fold it forward so that the fold is even with this side of the quilt. And then I would use one of these little quilt clips to just hold that in place. I want to put it back at the top corner here so that it's out of the way of the presser foot when I'm ready to start stitching again. Now I'm going to bring my quilt around here. Hard to get around my camera here. I'm going to bring it around here. I'm going to put my needle down. Make sure that my threads are to the back of the machine. I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to just slide the fabric under there and right up against the needle, and with the edge of the foot aligned with the edge of the fabric here. Put my foot down and begin to sew. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because my corner is coming up down here. Let me take just a couple more stitches. So, well, I'll move the camera. I'll take a couple more stitches just so you can, so everything is on camera. Okay, so my corner that's coming up is down here. So as I'm approaching that corner, I'm going to stop, the needle down, maybe a little closer. And I'm going to fold my fabric back on this 45-degree angle once again. So the bottom edge of the binding is in a straight line with the edge of the quilt. Now this is where, if you've got that seam roller, you could use it to make a nice crease in there, or just use your fingernail and finger press it. And then I'm going to fold it back again on itself. I'm sorry. Unfold it so that you can see the crease that you just made. Put a pin in there so that it's marked. And sew down to the pin. Stop when you get to the pin and pivot. So off toward the corner. If you want to do a little tacking stitch, now's the time to do it. And and sew off the corner. There's your needle and your thread, your foot, and snip your thread. Now we're going to turn the binding so it makes that straight line. It's folded on a 45-degree angle, and you've got a straight line, and fold it back again so the fold lines up with the corner over here. And put that binding clip, the quilting clip in there to hold it in place. And turn it around here. Now I'm going to show you one other little trick. One other tool that I did not mention that comes in handy is a hump jumper. If you have a FOF machine, it probably came with a tool that looks like this, that has different thicknesses on each side. That's a hump jumper. You can also buy these online, or you could use like a little sticky notepad as a hump jumper. Sometimes, if this is a particularly thick edge, the machine is going to meet some resistance trying to get started on the fabric, so that's where this will come in handy. So to start sewing down this side, I'm going to put my needle down. I'm going to raise my presser foot, put the fabric right back against the needle, like so, and I'm going to put this hump jumper right behind the needle and put my foot down. Now I've leveled the surface here. The foot is level and it's not trying to climb uphill, and that's going to make it easier to get started sewing on the fabric. And it's just going to push the hump jumper out behind it as it sews. So I'm going to sew down this side. I'm going to turn the camera off. You don't want to watch all this. I'm going to sew down here, and when I get to the corner, I'll show you once more how to sew that corner. So once again, as I'm approaching this corner, I'm going to stop with the needle down in the fabric. I'm going to fold this back at a 45-degree angle so that the edge of the binding down here is in a straight line with this edge of the quilt. I'm going to give it a press with my fingernail or with that roller. Unfold it and put a pin in the crease. Stitch down to the pin. Pivot. And sew to the corner. Raise the needle, raise the foot, cut the thread. Fold it back at the 45-degree angle. Fold it forward so the fold is aligned with the right edge of the quilt. Put that clip in there to hold it in place. Come around to start sewing down this next side. Put my needle down. Okay, so you should have the corners down pat now. I'm going to finish sewing this side in the next corner, and then I'm going to show you how to join the two ends of the binding together to finish it off. Okay, so I've sewn my last corner, and I'm gonna start coming down here to where I need to join my two ends together to finish this off. And I'm gonna stop some distance back from the end. You can see my end is coming up down here, and I'm going to stop several inches back from there. And if you want to do a little tacking stitch there, you can, just to hold it in place. And I'm going to take this off and cut the thread. So as I'm coming down to where I started my binding, these are going to overlap. And you remember that we ironed that little triangle in there. I'm going to unfold that, and I'm going to bring this second piece down, or the strip that I'm sewing now. I'm going to bring it down and lay it right on top of there. And then I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to measure it right down to the cut edge of that triangle. Remember, my triangle is here. I'm going to bring it right down to the cut edge of that triangle. And just cut this off. Now you can use pins to hold this together. If you have some two-sided water-soluble tape, you could use it. I'm out of two-sided water-soluble tape, so I'm just going to use this two-sided Scotch tape because this is going to get cut off anyway. I'm just going to take a little piece of it. Maybe. Well, phooey. When all else fails, use scissors, right? And I'm going to put that tape right here on the fabric. And tape this one that I'm bringing down right to it. Okay? So I've taped it in place. Now I can unfold this. And I can scrunch this up however I need to, because it's not going anywhere. I want to unfold this so that I'm bringing these two pieces together. I really want these edges lined up evenly. So I have it taped in place there. You can put some pins in here to hold it. And where I had ironed it, there's a nice crease that will be my guideline for sewing. So I'm just going to bring it around here. Put my needle down, put the end of the crease right back against the needle, and just sew with a 2 or 2.5 millimeter stitch length. Take my pins out. Before I do anything else, I'm going to audition it to make sure that it's going to lay flat and fill up that space just like I want it to. When I'm confident of that, I'm going to open this up. I see that I missed my corner here, which is not good, so I'm going to restitch this. Because I wanted to stitch off of the corner down here. So I would take that first stitching out of there. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now, but ideally that's what you're going to do. Well, I will do it. Just hold on and I'll come right back.